Welcome everyone to EPMware's webinar on self-driving metadata, automating metadata management for PBCS, FCCS, and OAC. So before we get started, just wanted to thank ODTUG for having us, and a quick reminder that Kscope 19 is June 23rd through 27th. You can register now at kscope19.odtug.com. You will see us there at a booth. Just a reminder, come by, say hello. So today, we're going to talk about automating metadata management in EPMware. We're going to do an overview of EPMware as well, but we're going to stray away from a typical walkthrough of EPMware and really dive into configuration for getting applications up and running for Oracle Cloud. We'll do a few overview of the solution and some slides about our company, and then we'll jump right into a live demo and actually show you how to get those configurations up and running and importing metadata, moving it through a workflow and pushing it out to a deployment to PBCS or any of the cloud applications that we support. So before we jump in, quick overview on the company. EPMware, headquartered in Silicon Valley, got offices in New Jersey, Mumbai. As far as our offerings go, we do have an on-premise AWS offering. It is the same exact code base, so very easy to move from the on-premise onto the cloud if you're not ready to go to the cloud yet, but typically just a quick schema copy. In addition to that, we do offer consulting as well as training and support. We do have a number of very highly qualified partners that you'll also see at Kscope that are capable of conducting a full lifecycle implementation from EPMware to also anything your Hyperion applications may need. And in addition to that, of course, training and support. We do provide custom training, and there is also training available online at keyteach.com. So a little bit about our company history. We are a newer player in the EPM market space. We launched back in 2014 with a vision to really bring metadata management and data governance back to the hands of the business. So, we saw a gap where business users were actively reaching out to the technology teams to manage and maintain metadata, and the more applications that are involved in the EPM space and interacting with upstream and downstream applications, it tends to cause a burden of metadata management, which ultimately creates issues and errors in the process from creating metadata all the way to deploying it. So we created EPMware completely from scratch and started with our on-prem application, kind of migrated and bought the cloud version up on AWS. And now we're focusing on adding a number of additional adapters outside of our existing application suite that's available. So what really is EPMware? EPMware is metadata management data governance software. And as I said, it's really meant for the business user to interact with your EPM applications to really understand what your application looks like in a production application instance when you request that metadata. So we're empowering the business users to log into EPMware, to visualize what their hierarchies look like, and then put that metadata request through a workflow process, and then allow EPMware to deploy it directly to your target applications. Now, what we've done differently in EPMware is we've created support and application intelligence for applications that we provide out-of-the-box support for. And the three that we're going to focus on today are PBCS or EPBCS, FCCS, and OAC. Now, what we allow you to do is quickly import these applications, share those hierarchies if there's a relationship between them, and then very quickly deploy that metadata incrementally out to those target applications. So if you have PBCS and some planning applications or HFM, you can very easily tie them together in EPMware and have a centralized place for requesting metadata and deploying metadata out to multiple different applications. So we can be the centralized management for cloud, for on-prem, or especially the mixture of cloud and on-prem applications. Now, automation is also a very important feature that we provide. Validations, derivations of metadata members and properties. What we see nowadays is customers spending a lot of time manually populating metadata in multiple different applications. And the result of that really is inconsistent reporting across applications, or even managed services teams really spending a lot of time focusing on manual propagation of metadata properties. Now, we've created a pretty great system to be able to automate this process between applications so that your users don't have to worry about properties that are automatically created or can be defined by logic, or even your administrators, and really allow your administrators and your management team to focus on what really is providing value out of those target applications. All right, so what we see nowadays is the on-prem and the hybrid application of Oracle products is really creating much more manual metadata maintenance. And as we said, these errors in financial reporting really can cause issues across the application suite. So kind of a repeat of my last slide, but creating metadata in EPMware really is a 5-step process. It can be architected several different ways. We can be the centralized hub and spoke for all metadata, regardless of what type of application it is. It doesn't have to be an Oracle on-prem app. It doesn't have to be a cloud application. You are able to create generic applications that are completely agnostic to the application type. So if you have a PBCS application, you have EBS as your general ledger, and then you have another third-party application that needs metadata, you can tie them together centrally in EPMware and use EPMware to either author metadata directly in EPMware, or you can even source metadata from an inbound application such as an ERP. Now, what we typically see is customers will start off with managing metadata for either their on-prem or their cloud applications, and they'll source metadata from their chart of account segments. So using our ERP import module, we allow you to very easily create a delta from your ERP, identify what those deltas are on a hourly or daily basis, and then EPMware automatically creates a request for that new metadata that's identified. It pushes it through the workflow, and then your standard workflow process takes over. Now, users can also log in via the web. They can visualize their metadata, and then they can submit that process into a workflow. So you decide where you want your users to interact. You can say, I want my account dimension and my entity dimension to flow from either SAP or from EBS, but I have a project dimension or a product dimension that needs to be managed only in EPMware. And so users will log into EPMware, they'll create new requests, or they'll create requests to change existing metadata members, And what EPMware has is a mapping engine which will synchronize metadata between similar applications. So during our implementation phase, we'll identify what applications hierarchies are similar, and if they're slightly different or very different, we can create logic to map those together so that a request is created once, and then metadata flows out to multiple applications using that one request. Now, once that's done, that request will go into a workflow process, and EPMware routes that to a series of reviewers and approvers. Now, you can have a workflow that has many different stages. We've seen as many as 20 to 30 different stages. Or you can even have a workflow that has 0 stages for complete lights out automation. While this process is occurring, you're able to monitor real-time progress in the dashboard and identify if there are users holding up your metadata from flowing from your source system or from creation in EPMware directly out to your target applications. So you always have a full visibility and a full audit trail of who's creating metadata, what stage is it in, if anybody has reviewed it, approved it, or has not yet reviewed it or approved it, and then if it's been successfully deployed to the target application. And that's really key, is to know when that metadata has made it to that target app, because then our users will receive notifications that metadata has successfully been deployed. And they are able to either report on that metadata or they're able to load data to that metadata item. So a little bit more about the direct integration and the applications that we support. So out of the box, EPMware provides connectivity to OAC, FCCS, PBCS, of course, ARCS, PCMCS are also out there, and we're always adding new adapters to Oracle Cloud applications as they become available or as they're changing. So, typically within a week or 2 weeks, you'll see those available in EPMware. Oracle on-premise applications are also supported, so you can have a mix of cloud and on-prem apps. So we support HFM, Essbase, planning, FDM-EE, EPMA, and DRM. We know a lot of customers are moving away from EPMA, or even if they're on classic apps, they're looking to get a little bit more automation or centralization there. And of course, DRM as well. So there are customers right now using EPMware as a workflow engine for DRM. So, those options are always available. But obviously, we always recommend using EPMware as a centralized metadata management, and not only for the workflow. In addition to that, we also have general ledger adapters, as well as other ERP applications or applications like Anaplan, Workday, NetSuite, OneStream. So you can always tell us that there's another application that I have, a third-party app. I'd like to create an integration to that application, and we can certainly build something for you as a custom API, or one of our consulting partners can create a custom integration for you. So what do you really get with the out-of-the-box adapters? One of the biggest benefits is the OneClick application import, and that means that when you start using EPMware and you're connecting to PBCS, for instance, registering an application in EPMware just simply means you can go to the application screen and to the configuration, and then we'll see our application details. So you populate our user ID, the password, and our tenant name, and then EPMware can, with one click, reach out to that application on the cloud, take an extract of it, and then load it into our platform for visualization and editing, as you see here. So here, this is a screenshot of our metadata explorer, which allows users to simply browse metadata across the organization. So you're not allowed to make changes in this view. That's in the create request view. But this is a great way to publish metadata to the rest of the organization and allow them to see what's in working status versus what is a live production hierarchy. And the views that you get over here for as far as properties, default values are pretty much the same as we see in the target systems, and that's what we've created. Is clicking that one-click application import allows EPMware to go out and in a matter of minutes just create an extract and then build the entire hierarchy here for you to interact with. So it takes just a few minutes to do that, and then you can start creating requests instantly. At the same time, as soon as you register that app and it's loaded into EPMware, your deployment is also configured at the same time. So within 10 to 15 minutes, you can have a hierarchy loaded into the application, into the EPMware application. You can create requests, and then you can instantly deploy to that target app. Now, that's been pretty phenomenal for some of our customers. They've used EPMware to migrate from HFM to FCCS, from on-premise S-based applications into OAC, but it allows you to really build a quick integration to that target app without having to worry about custom code, custom integrations, and you can get a full visual trail of how your metadata started and how it's been modified across months or even years. In addition to that, we've also included real-time validations and derivations, inheritance, into the application. So you should expect your PBCS app to behave how you normally expect it to behave if you were to make metadata modifications directly in PBCS. What we allow you to do here is to use the out-of-the-box validations and derivations. That means that in addition to the very basic duplicate member name real-time check, we also have additional validations such as member name alias checks that run on the fly as users are interacting with the request screen, special characters, and many, many more. I'll show you an example in our logic builder engine. So you can very easily modify those logic scripts and tailor them to add your own custom business validations. But we provide those out of the box admin guide type of validations for you that you can just simply activate and get up and running on day one. So in addition to that, we also have compliance on SOC 2. We are also GDPR compliant. A little bit about our workflows. The workflows, like I said, can have a number of different stages. You can start with a request. It always starts with a request, actually. It goes into a validate stage if you're not running real-time validations. You can layer in a number of different review and approve stages, but then ultimately everything ends up in a deploy stage. And when it gets to a deploy stage, that's where EPMware Scheduler takes a look at what is ready for deployment, and an administrator can either execute an ad hoc deployment or a scheduled process can run, pushing metadata out to multiple different applications at once. So an example of this is, I create an entity. That entity goes through a full life cycle of workflow. Users log in, they enrich properties, and goes out to the business for approval, or the other way around, and then finally goes to the deploy. Your admin comes in and says, all right, I want to deploy this entity to PBCS and HFM, and I want to push it out to an interface table in one shot. and EPMware will instantly push it out there. It will keep track of the success or the failure of that deployment as well. In addition to that, you can also create a zero-stage workflow. So that kind of workflow will start at request and will go automatically to deploy. So there will be no user stages in between. So we have a customer using that right now where they have a lights out process running for all of their cost centers. And what it's doing is identifying new cost centers in an interface table on the inbound side. And it's flowing them through EPMware, keeping track of where those cost centers are being mapped to. And it's being mapped to 5 different Essbase cubes. And then we deploy those directly to 5 different Essbase cubes in one shot. And if there's any issues along the way, the administrator will get an email saying, you know, a validation's failed, and then they can take the necessary action to reach out to SAP in this instance and correct any properties that we are validating for directly in EPMware. Right, so a few exclusive features that you're only going to find in EPMware. Of course, auto import of hierarchies, target system integration, our deployment engine, ERP import module, the dashboard, of course, real-time validations and derivations. Are really, it saves a ton of time in custom coding. But you know, a lot of customers also see no per node fees is probably one of the biggest reasons that folks will come and talk to us. So you get a great product with automation and central governance, but we're not paying you know, big box prices for it. So with that said, let's jump into the a live demo, and I can walk you through actual configuration of PBCS and show you how quickly we can get that up and running. And just a quick reminder, if there are any questions, you can easily just type them into the chat panel, and we'll address those questions towards the end of the webinar. Here we have our sign-in screen, and I'm going to log in here. We are supporting single sign-on, so if you are using SAML 2.0, a great way to integrate directly using single sign-on directly with your existing IDs, company IDs, or you can always set up native IDs. And as soon as you log in, you're taking a look at our dashboard. And in the dashboard, you get a full visual trace of requests that require your action. So either you need to review something, approve something, or just provide some type of sign-off in a request. Down below, you can see that there's a review, approve, deploy stages as part of this workflow. We've also got options for custom stage in case there's additional integration that's required. But again, these are all managed and maintained directly here in our workflow engine, and you can make changes there. This provides also a real-time trace of all of the activity that's going on in each of these stages. So let's jump over into the configuration, and let's talk about adding a new application into EPMware. So here I'm going into my configuration screen, and I'm going to come over here and click on Add Application. And here, when I add an application, I'm going to give it an application name. We're going to pick what that target application name is. So here we're going to call it and now we're going to pick a application type. So here you can see the full list of applications that we support. Of course, you're picking what that application type is, and then that's how EPMware knows exactly what it needs to choose and lay out when it goes and extracts that information. So here we're going to pick PBCS, for instance. And this process really works the same for OAC and FCCS. So I'll show you how that works. We're going to pick cloud over there we're going to pick default for our security class. We're going to go to deployment and just do a direct deployment. And nothing needed over here. And then we're going to choose our app name, admin, and then a password. So once we hit save over here, let's close that out. And go find our PBCS new application. So it's sitting over here. And now once we get to this stage, we're going to simply click the import button. And now we're left with two options. So our two options are, of course, auto import, where PBCS is going to go reach out into your cloud application, and it's going to execute a series of jobs that will create an extract of that metadata, and will transfer that into EPMware. Now, EPMware is going to parse through that metadata hierarchy, and it's going to build that hierarchy in EPMware as that PBCS application. So this is, part of the process that really takes quite a bit of time historically, and to really understand, what does the hierarchy need to look like? What are my standard properties? How should they be organized? But here, this really speeds up that process and allows you to get up and running very quickly. So here I can click either auto import, but you also have another option here for manual import. So if you were to take an XML extract out of your target application, or you had a CSV file, you can just browse to that file automatically using this process and import that application here. Now, this is also used for non-cloud applications. So if I have a hierarchy I need to load in, I can just load that hierarchy in over here using the manual import. All right, so I'm going to hit cancel over here, go back to a different PBCS application, and I'm going to hit the import button just to give you a better working example. So here, our process is actually kicking off and going to talk to that PBCS application, and is pulling that application data. So here we'll see in real time how this process works. We don't have to sit here and babysit it. Of course, we can just close this. But through our log, it's keeping track of everything that it's doing. So I can either cancel my import here, or I can go back and view the progress bar. But again, and I can even take a look at the log file to see what's going on. Now here, this gives us a pretty good visibility to take a look at, if there's communication error between EPMware and that target app. Maybe I didn't configure something correctly in the target app. Maybe that target application's down and can't communicate effectively. So everything is logged and available centrally to look at over there. Now I'm gonna cancel that import. Let's go to, here we go. Now let's go back and take a look at the result of a successful import from one of my cloud applications. So let's go to PBCS. Let's take a look at my account dimension. And now here, I can see that my application's successfully been imported, and I can browse through my hierarchy. And click over here, and on the right, I have all my standard PBCS hierarchies, and this works exactly the same for FCCS and OAC. You're going to see everything you manage in that application, but you can always manage it over here as well. In addition to that, we can always add custom categories and sort our properties differently if we need to. But again, the power of EPMware is to be able to view this metadata and view these properties here automatically without having to do massive configuration changes. All right, in addition to that, here I've got all my dimensions. And scroll down, let's take a look at project, for instance. And now I can take a look at all of my hierarchies as they reside in that target app. We can also add additional dimensions and not deploy them to those target apps. So there's a number of different customizations that we can do to add additional analytics or additional mapping within EPMware before it pushes out to the target app. So we'd be glad to discuss those with you. You can just reach out to us separately, and we can set up a call to talk through advanced technical requirements. So now I'm not making any changes here in my Metadata Explorer view, and let's see if we've got some members here. So if you can see this member, it's highlighted in red. I can click on this member, and I can see that because it's in red, it's actually working in EPMware. So somebody's created this metadata member here, and I can right-click on this member, and I can take a look at the history. This tells me that this request, this member is actually in request 1585 and has not deployed yet to a target application. So I can easily just click on this member here, 1585, and it will take me directly to that request. Now, this is a request screen where the users actually created the request, and as an administrator, I can monitor, what are the changes that are actively happening in the app. Up above in the request screen, as it's opened up in a different tab, I can see some of the header, like request date, the due date, the description. I can see the priority that they've assigned. I can see the workflow that they've assigned as well, and the status. And then here we can see the different request lines. So every single change that's created in EPMware is individually tracked by line item. So we can see that somebody's created a member in a PBCS app, and they've also decided to create it in an FCCS or an OAC application too. So you don't have to maintain your metadata separately in different applications. You can do it in one central request, and you can have that deploy out to multiple different applications. And that's where the mapping process really takes over. So whenever I create a new member in a hierarchy, let's click on this member right here, and let's see how it drills down directly into the application. So we can see that not only did this member get added FX rates, but this cache account was also added. And I can see all the different properties that were updated here. Now, since this request has already been submitted into the workflow, I can't make any additional changes, but anybody with access to be able to create a new request or to be able to modify this will have access to these action items. So you can create new members, of course, as a child, as a sibling, insert shared members. So if you wanted to create an alternate hierarchy and add those as shared members, very easy to do so. Insert a member, remove shared members, delete members, rename members, edit properties, reorder children. So, you've got a number of different transactions that you can take on this application. And again, if these are mapped to any other application that you want them to be, it will create additional line items for those applications as well, so that everything is tied together in one request. And when this gets to deployment, it pushes out to all of those applications at one time. Down below, we have a activity log, which keeps a very chatty log of everything that's going on in this request. Source values, target values, so very easy to come back and just take a look at what's going on, who changed what, and if somebody changed something by mistake, you can easily track down what that previous value was. You can do that here, or you can even do it over here where you click on property changes and you can see what prior values were and new values were. Up above, as soon as I'm done creating a new metadata item in this request, I have the ability to submit it into the workflow. Now, this is a pretty important feature in EPMware where you have the ability to create metadata and it sits in the hierarchy, but you don't have to push it into the workflow. So it doesn't reach out to all of the business users and ask them for approvals on the metadata. You can build it in a draft mode, kind of like you build a draft email. So you create that request, whatever changes you want. As soon as you're ready for it, you submit it into the workflow. And once it submits into the workflow, it reaches out to all of the users, reviewers, approvers, and they receive a notification via email, and they'll log into this request and they'll say, all right, well, I can see that our admin created this member 100 103. I can see that the properties, everything look okay. If I have responsibilities to enrich this member, I can simply come in and make the changes right here in this part of the screen. And then when I'm done, I'll simply hit the approve button and send it along its way. And then EPMware automatically moves it to the next stage in the workflow, if there is a next stage, and then notifies those users as well. If I were to reject something, it will stop this request in its process. It will notify the administrator, and it'll let folks know that this request cannot proceed because something is wrong. And typically users will add notes such as, this doesn't belong in this month's deployment. We can wait to deploy this for the next quarter or whatever. But what it's doing is it's really bringing our users together. It's allowing our end users to be held accountable for the metadata that they're creating. And it allows for centralized communication between our end users and our administrators in one web-based engine. In addition to that, you can always add attachments, maybe supporting evidence or whatever, and then have this go along its way. So once this goes into the workflow process, you can track the real-time progress here in the dashboard. As an administrator, of course, if you wanted to change the workflow, you can very easily do that here in the workflow builder. You can add new stages, change stages on the fly, and then reassign requests back to those new stages. So all the management of the workflow is done in a point-and-click fashion right here on the front end. Going back to our logic builder, I wanted to give you an example of some of these validations. So here you can see we've got new primary members being created. The validations will check to see if it already exists. Here we're checking for special characters, checking for leading or trailing spaces and member names, checking for special characters as the first character, checking for alias values to see if they're duplicates, special characters and member names, consolidation operators. So a lot of those checks and balances that that admins typically have to validate either in Excel or using scripts, we run those automatically on the fly. And this is one of the greatest features of having these admin scripts come out of the box. You really don't have to worry about that process, because as users are interacting with this hierarchy, EPMware automatically on the fly will give you a warning message and tell you that this is not valid. and it's either because it's a system validation that's running, or if we have other custom validations that are running, it will notify the user right here on this screen as they're interacting with the process. So it's a great way to keep garbage, as we call it, from flowing into the workflow and into the target application. I mean, one of the biggest problems we see is without this level of automation and derivation, multiple different applications get to the deployment phase, and sometimes we miss validations. And when we miss those validations, those deployments kick out from the target applications and they fail deployment. And that requires us to kind of go back and forth in the workflow process and interact with users when we can keep those validations triggered at the very beginning of the request process. All right, let's go take a look at the deployment. And here in the deployment engine, let's take a look at the monitor, which tells us how metadata is being pushed out to the target app. Now, if we have scheduled deployments, they'll run automatically based on the schedule. You can deploy them by application or even by request. But every time a deployment's created, it will automatically generate a deployment ID that shows us that something is being executed against a target app. All right, so here we can see that request number 1614 was successfully deployed, start time and end time. But we can also see that this request, for instance, failed. And we can click on the deployment ID. And here it'll tell us when it failed. And if we want more detail, we can click on the log and it'll open up this log and give us some more detail into the exact communication between EPMware and the target application. So you may get messages back saying that you may have missed a validation, or you may have the target system may be down. You're not getting communication with that target app. So it gives you very detailed member-specific information in that deployment log. So if you're deploying metadata to 3, 4, 5 different applications or more, you can centrally see which application has issues instead of having to go to that application and pull the logs back and understand where your failures are. In an ideal scenario, of course, there wouldn't be any failures other than communication failures. So let's go over to our audit module and take a look at some reports. So every single transaction that occurs in EPMware is centrally tracked. So we can run reports against that metadata. Reports like generating active hierarchies with properties. We have the ability to compare members between applications. A great one that I like is member audit, or you can even flatten a hierarchy and spit it out. So that goes out directly to CSV files or HTML files. But again, we've got security reports that can run here, security by groups, by users. So there's a number of different types of reports that we can generate. These are all out of the box. And if you wanted another custom report based on the transactions that we're holding in EPMware, we can certainly generate those for you as well. Right, so let's go back to our slide. And 1 sec, I'm just trying to figure out how to use this. And we'll go over to some questions. So one of the questions that we see that's come in, let me just scroll up and see what we have here. So the first question here is PBCS connection question. How does EPMware know the URL of a PBCS application? During the configuration, we only show the PBCS app name. How does it know what URL to go to? Excellent, excellent question. And I think I just simply glossed over that. So let's go over to our configuration screen, and let's go take a look at the properties of a PBCS application. Here we go. So here, when I configure a PBCS application, I do have additional properties that I need to populate. Now, these are my server URL, for instance, my service name, my tenant name, and then using my user ID and password that's passed through secure connection. This is how EPMware knows, or the EPMware knows which application that it's actually talking to. So any application you have, you're going to register it here, and then you're going to add the additional details like, is this a test application? Is it my prod application? And everything else is automatically populated. But that's exactly how we know which instance of an application to connect to if we're going to a cloud application. All right, we'll go to the next question. How readable, understandable are the logs in the EPMware application? Since as a planning and PBCS developer, this is an area of pain where we have to debug or decipher the logs and find the exact error. So let's take a look at one of those logs in the deployment, and we'll use a let's see if I can find a PBCS application. Let's just say this one. This one was deployed. I think it was deployed partially. And let's take a look at how chatty it really is. Open this up in Notepad++. Right, so let's take a look at this log. Now we're scrolling down here. We can see which line it's trying to deploy. It has already created communication. And then here we're seeing a message. So an error occurred during the cube refresh. Level 0 members cannot have label-only data storage. And then the exact member name. So a very, very specific error message. But again, we are simply pulling back messages from the REST API and getting those error messages. So the same communication that you're going to get if you were to manually create this integration, you would get over here. So we're not really getting anything more advanced, but it is possible that we may be getting more messaging using the REST API. Now I'm just taking a stab at that, but we're more than willing to get on a call and work through what kind of errors you're seeing to understand if this is something that we can present prior to moving forward to a deployment. So next question is, how does EPMware handle deleting members and the data associated, or do you have to make sure that all the data for an existing member is moved prior to deleting? So great question, probably a pretty important question we get asked at during implementation timelines as well. Let me go back into our deployment. So a pretty common configuration item that we usually do is to stop the delete member from being accessed. So if you're an end user, you probably don't want as an admin, you don't want your end users to have the delete member option even available. If you are choosing to delete members, as far as moving data in and out and loading it properly back into the target applications, it's more of a manual process. What we do see here is during our deployment, we can configure a deployment to have a pre-deployment or a post-deployment script. So during a delete, if we want to be able to take a extract and then load that data to that application, again, to that new data, we can do that, but it's part of an implementation where we'll identify exactly what type of members we're deleting data for, how are we going to take those extracts, the level 0 extract, where are we going to load them back to. It is something that most of our customers are doing manually right now, but of course, if you wanted to automate that process, we give you the buckets during the deployment phase to be able to fully automate that process. Right, the next question is there reporting that can be exported for a time range to use as a communication to the non-EPMware user community target application users that would be impacted by metadata change? So I'll read that one over to myself. Time range. Okay, so I guess what I'm seeing here is this question is about reporting for a point in time of a hierarchy. And here, if we take a look at our metadata, you can run a report that says, give me the hierarchies with the properties as of a specific date. So here I can pick my application, and then I can pick my as of date. So EPMware has a snapshot of every single hierarchy and as of a specific date. So if I wanted to go back to January 2019, for instance, and I wanted to give users an export of the hierarchy as of that specific date, I'm able to just choose it on the calendar and then run a report here. That report we can then publish out to the rest of the user community to say, this was the version at this point in time in the history. So hopefully I've answered that question correctly. Okay, so another question is, does this tool work with another cloud application? Do you have any interfaces with QuickBooks? So currently, we don't have interfaces with QuickBooks. Like I said before, we do have the ability to, as part of implementations, and even our implementation partners can create integrations using APIs for other third-party applications, so we can quickly call that API and have EPMware deploy using that API. It's a very common process and part of an implementation. It doesn't only work with cloud applications, it does work with cloud and on-premise applications. There is an EPMware agent that enables secure communication to on-premise applications as well. So if you're using any of the cloud apps and you have a hybrid landscape of HFM, Essbase, planning, whatever, even other non-Oracle applications, EPMware can maintain centralized metadata between all of those applications, regardless of whether you're using EPMware on the cloud or whether you're using EPMware on-premise. So I know we're running close to time, but I think we've got a few more questions we can work through. Is there an ability to handle member mapping? So for example, I have the same entity in HFM and planning, but the planning application has a prefix. Can that be handled in EPMware? Another great question. So in the mapping process, which I'm not going to jump into right now because it's got a lot of screens there, and we can do that on another custom demo if you just reach out to us. We can map by dimension and we can map by property. Now, once that mapping is enabled, when I create a new member here in my hierarchy, that mapping is triggered in real time, and it's going to create a corresponding line item for that other mapped target application. Now, what I can do is I can use my logic builder to give me customizations to that mapping. So I can say that I have an account here that needs to be created. It's 100-103. Now, if I map this over to OAC, it will create another line item and it'll say 100-103. But if I need a prefix added to that, my custom mapping script will apply that prefix automatically. So it might have ACC underscore 100-103 created automatically using that mapping. So that's just an example of a derived member or a mapped member mapping. But we see other customers create mapping that automatically adds a member to an alternate hierarchy. It automatically adds members to other applications as well, or it prevents members from going to certain hierarchies. There's so many different examples. I'd need probably like another hour to go through those, but certainly please reach out to us and we can walk through more examples. Last question, of course, what is the approximate cost, just to get some general ideas? So we do charge by target application, or sorry, I should say target product. We do not charge by node, so it's always unlimited nodes. But our target applications are currently priced at $1,500 per product. That means if you have 5 Essbase applications, it's still $1,500 per target product. And if you have Essbase, Planning, and HFM, it's 1,500 times 3. So we are enabling customers to get up and running on the product as easily and as fast as possible, while still remaining to try to be a cost-effective solution. Of course, on-premise, it's completely unlimited. So there's unlimited users, unlimited nodes, unlimited applications. So just depending on how you want to structure this application in your cloud strategy and with your capability for licensing is the option that you would choose. Again, we'd love to talk through these in more detail. We're just about at time. Karen, I want to thank you for having us at ODTUG. We're looking forward to seeing everybody at Kscope. We've got a bigger booth than last year. We're super excited to be there. So come by, come see us. And of course, you can always reach out to us at EPMware.com. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much, Avi. Thank you all for attending this afternoon. I hope everybody has a great rest of your day.